There's absolutely no damage to the brain. There's no bleeding in the brain. In fact, we don't do CT scans as a rule anymore because if you do a CT scan, odds are you're not going to see anything. So, there should be a brain in there. Photographic evidence is important for your future and your kids' future. But what I'm going to tell you is that you should not see any significant damage. The damage that occurs at the cellular level, and it is very good at healing. This is what we know, and I'll make more about this. As you can see, you don't have to lose consciousness. You don't have to, get hit in the head. A good solid blow to the body that puts, as you can see in this picture, you can have linear forces or you can have rotational forces. Anything that hits, somebody hits you right on the side, blows you this way, your head goes that way, let me tell you something, that's force that's on that brain, all right? So you don't need to be hit in the head, you don't need to be hit and lose consciousness to get a concussion. Concussions have a lot of range, right? You don't have to, be totally confused at that moment. Sometimes the confusion develops over time. One of my favorite things, real quick, I know an Atlanta Falcon player who, when I was doing some work with him, I said to him, so how many concussions have you had? He said, well, how many did they tell me I had? How many do I think I had? I said, well, let's start with, how many do you think you had? How many did they tell you you had? He said, 0. And I said, well, how many do you think you had? Now, this is somebody who was known for going across the middle, all right, and getting hit. 13-and-a-half-year NFL career. He said 9 or 10. And I thought to myself, knowing what I know, 9 or 10 concussions over 13-and-a-half-year NFL career, that's not horrible. He says, no, a year. Now, let me explain to you why I'm telling you this. Because if you listen to the hype, one of the things that you would think is this guy'd be drooling into a cup. For those of you who are older like me, you remember John Mackey, the tight end for the Baltimore Colts, single face mask, that's what you would think this guy looked like. But you know what? Out of the 10,000 people I've tested in my life, probably one of the 5 smartest people, no sign of CTE whatsoever, right? But I asked him, I said, what did you do? He said, well, I would get up, or if I couldn't get up, my teammates would help me up, point me towards our sideline. I'd go onto the sideline, take my helmet off, put it up under my arm, hold it like I was holding a football so that they couldn't take it away from me. And then I just sat there and waited till I heard my number group called. Guy's in great shape, all right? That's 130, roughly, concussions, although some of them may have been continuations of a previous. Right? So what I want you to understand is it doesn't automatically mean that you're going to be messed up. Can I promise that you won't get CTE? No, but we'll talk about that in just a few moments. The mechanism of injury is a blow to the head. It causes a metabolic cascade. The brain needs glucose to have energy. The body tries to respond, but blood flow doesn't get where it needs to go. That's what makes you feel crappy, okay? The symptoms that you should be looking for, just spend real quick a moment or two on these. If they appear dazed or stunned, more so than every day, is confused about what position they play in, if they go out or go onto the wrong side of the field, winces when, heading the ball, obviously that was for soccer and I should have taken that out, is unsure of the game, the score of the opponent. Hey, are we in the 5th quarter yet? I don't know. Moves clumsily, answers questions slowly. Really, guys, how many fingers do I have up? And the kid says 8, and you say that's close enough. Not a good answer, okay? So, just keep that in mind. Loses consciousness briefly, doesn't remember part of the quarter. All of these things are pretty obvious. It's not rocket science. The symptoms that we see with our patients, most common, headache. We hear complaints of fogginess. If somebody tells you their brain feels foggy, that sounds silly to you guys. I'm sure it sounds silly to me as a dad. But I will tell you, fogginess just means that it just things aren't clear. It's not easy to think things through. With some of the game plans that you guys put in place, this is something that your position players need to be able to think through. If they feel sluggish, any of these things here, if they just don't feel right, when in doubt, you sit them out. Number one most common complaint, especially among high school and college athletes, headache, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, drowsiness. Look, the reason you feel the fatigue, folks, is because when you have a headache or you have a pain and you're trying to just overcome it and push through it, it wears you out, all right? So remember that. It happens to the kids too. Now, this is an important slide, and I want to lay this out there. Look, probably the number one thing that I face as a doc is to tell people how long it's going to take them to get back on the field. A lot of coaches, they feel like their careers, especially in the high schools, are dependent upon their one loss. And let's be honest, it is true. So you want your players on the field. So there's sometimes a push and pull about getting those kids back in the game. I want you to understand, our goal is to get that kid back as quickly as possible. It is not to hold your star players, because they're the ones that typically get the concussions, out of the game. I want to make this clear. This is what we know for the most part. In the first 7 to 10 days, only about 40% get back to baseline, or 100%. Within 14 to 17 days, you're up to about 65 to 70%. 21 to 24 days, you're up to about 85%. And between 4 and 6 weeks, you've got people up to about 93, 94, 95%. But the expectation is that your kid will get back to 100%. And if they do the right things, they will get back to 100% quickly. First thing I will tell you, if you put a kid back in before they are recovered, while it is rare, you can have what is called second impact syndrome, and that can result in death. It's not hyperbole, this is true. If you put a kid back in there before they're healed and they get another concussion, it can result in death. It's rare, but it happens. Now, how can you tell? Look, in Georgia, just like everywhere else, you put people through a 5-stage exertion progression. And I'm throwing this in here, I don't have a slide for it, but I want you to understand how we try to make it easier for you. Basically, you progress a person over different kinds of physical activities until they can complete it without having any symptoms. They can't do them on the same day. So stage 1's on Monday, 2 is on Tuesday, 3 is on Wednesday, 4 is on Friday, Thursday, 5 would be on Friday. So basically, as you go through that, when the kid can do that, the kid is able to take hardcore exertion and be able to do what they have to do and not have symptoms. That kid's ready to go back, right? So the other thing to put in the back of your mind, if your kid can't spend a day in school, they're not ready to go back onto the field. So you have to be like a parent and say, dude, you got to get your butt back in school, you got to do what you have to do, and you have to be able to make it through the whole day. These are things that you have to think about for the kid. Last but not least, we expect these kids to get back to 100%. If you do the right things, these kids will get back to 100% a lot faster than the old school ways. How many people in here think they've had a concussion at one time or another? Not formally diagnosed, maybe it was formally diagnosed, but how many people in here think they've had a concussion at least one time in their life? You know what it's like, right? So when we talk about these things, I want you to understand that the goal is you know when you're not right. Last but not least, there are 6 trajectories that will affect the recovery. And these are the following. Cervical comes from the neck, cervical vertebra. Number 2 and number 3 are related. Oculomotor, which is eye movement, and vestibular, which is balance and dizziness. All right? Number 4 is cognitive and fatigue. Number 5 is post-traumatic migraine. And number 6 is anxiety and mood. And it's not the classic psychiatric anxiety and mood issues. It's the kind of issue that when your brain isn't working the way you think it should, that's scary. And that's the kind of anxiety that you get. All right? Long and short of it is, these 6 trajectories affect how long it takes you to recover 100%. And if you get a kind of a fix on them in the very beginning, you'll be able to get that person to where they need to be. Sometimes there's dizziness, all right? So what I will tell you is, how do you relieve dizzy spells besides kind of just shutting them down a little bit? Stop chasing your damn tail. All right, now before I finish, I want to just add one last thing, okay? There are 4 things we tell every student, every patient, every person who has a concussion. And I want you to understand these 4 things, right? Number 1, hydrate. You have to drink at least 64 ounces of water a day. Just told you about how to hydrate. I'm not gonna go into that. But if you're not a regular water drinker, folks, I'm here to tell you the first 4 or 5 days, you're gonna piss like a racehorse, okay? But after those first 4 or 5 days, you are going to feel great. It'll help your head, it'll help your body. Number 2, you got to eat well. She talked about nutrition. Don't stop. I'm not gonna tell you not to go to fast food places. I mean, it's part of life, okay? Because you're not gonna listen to me anyway, but make sure that you eat appropriately, all right? Also, it wouldn't kill you to take a multivitamin. They make chewable Flintstones, whatever. Just encourage good health. Number 3, this is the big one. I get pushback from everybody, and I'm telling you, every single one of you will get the pushback here. And that is, you must have good sleep hygiene. Good sleep hygiene is 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, at least for the time during recovery. What am I telling you? This is what I'm telling you. Good sleep hygiene does not mean at 1 o'clock in the morning texting your buddies. It doesn't mean at 1 o'clock in the morning going ahead and streaming Hulu or Netflix. And most of our kids are too young for Netflix and chill, and just remember Hulu and commitment. Number 4, thank you for getting that, for those of you that didn't. Okay. And number 4, this is the last one, and this is the counter, okay? Number 4 is this. Back in the day, we used to take somebody with a concussion, put them in a dark room, take all the stimulation away, and tell them to sit there until they feel better. Believe it or not, that's really not the right way to treat them. What we do is we talk about as tolerated. We talk about basically building up a little bit of activity as tolerated. As soon as they get any kind of symptom, tell them to stop. Don't tell them to finish what they're doing. Don't tell them to push through. Stop at that moment. 5 minutes, 10 minutes max of chilling, they'll be able to, the symptoms will resolve, they'll be able to go back to what they were doing. If the symptoms don't resolve in 5 to 10 minutes, they didn't stop immediately, all right? You can fool your friends, but you can't fool your own brain. So, hydration, nutrition, sleep hygiene, and activity as tolerated. Let them stretch with the team, let them do a little bit of stuff like that, and just don't let them make contact, don't let them do other things, just ease them back in, and you'll find that they'll do significantly better. It improves blood flow, gets stuff to the brain. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I know, I guess me coming up playing football, they would tell you, like if you did get, a concussion or something, when you go to sleep, to check on them, maybe check on them or whatever, or don't let them go to sleep, or check on them for their first hour. Is that still the case, or has that changed now?
Sleep is actually the right thing to let them do, but you want to make sure that, use common sense, all right? If they're lethargic afterwards, if they're not really moving, if they're, really confused, take them to the ER. Otherwise, let them go ahead and go to sleep. What you want to make sure of is that their eyes kind of move and track. They don't get so sluggish that you can't really talk to them. It'll be a noticeable difference. You don't necessarily have to keep them awake. It just, when in doubt, always kind of lean towards getting them to, the urgent care center or the ER. It's very rare that you see in a concussion an actual bleed in the brain. But of course, Having said that, the next one you get may be that one, so you don't want that to happen.
Got time for one more question. Right here, Hood.
Yes, sir.
Real quick,